Hello, everyone. Hi, good morning. Welcome. Hi. Um, excuse me. I am just trying to make sure that people can let themselves in, which would be lovely. Um, we'll see. It looks like people are managing to do that now, hopefully. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Um, Yeah, this is a topic we are particularly passionate about and felt very timely because it is Stress Awareness Month and also it is Autism Acceptance Month and neurodivergent people and autistic people particularly are at an increased risk of experiencing burnout and typically more quickly than neurotypical people because of the added and compounded stresses that people are exposed to. So thank you all so much for being here. Um, so we don't have that long this morning, given that this is not only one, but I suppose two huge topics. We could talk about stress for hours, we could think about burnout for hours, and we're going to do our absolute best. So just for anyone who is new here, who doesn't know us at PMAC, who doesn't know me, so my name is Hayley. And I deliver the free trainings, the free webinars at PMAC. And we essentially specialise in bespoke trainings for organisations on really anything that relates to mental health or wellbeing. Um, and today, as we said, we are thinking very much about stress and burnout and, the function that stress serves and how does burnout develop and progress so that we can try and reflect a little bit and think about where we are, how we're doing. We're going to be thinking about strategies that we can implement to prevent burnout, to undo burnout, essentially, and a couple of different factors. So again, for anyone who is new to our webinars, we do like to make them as engaging as possible. So throughout this session, there are opportunities to share your reflections, in which case there is absolutely no right or wrong, to share tips, strategies, things that have worked for you. We really want to kind of utilize each other as a resource, share ideas, learn from each other's experiences. And throughout the session, therefore, we're going to have the opportunity to engage anonymously through things like word clouds, polls that will pop up on your screen or through the chat function, or you're welcome to use the chat function. However, people will be able to see your name. So it's entirely up to you, however you feel most comfortable. And just to preface before we start today, like just to kind of know and recognize and understand the fact that stress can and does and will impact us all differently. And we all are exposed to different stresses in our lives currently that have been there for a greater period of time, not such a long period of time, that are having a greater or lesser impact on us. And fundamentally, every single one of us here today is doing our absolute best with the skills and the understanding and the resources, and importantly, the support that we do or don't have. We are doing our absolute best. And so, just to kind of preface, as we talk through things today that may or may not be useful, that is really just to kind of offer some additional tools, additional ways of thinking, additional ideas that might be tools that you can then kind of have in your pocket, in your toolbox that you can use. And it's not intended, I suppose, to cause any sort of shame, guilt, embarrassment that we've not been doing anything beforehand. You might be already doing lots of things, and the reality just is that there are lots of pressures and stresses that you are under, and again, you are just fundamentally doing your best. So again, this is an opportunity to kind of reflect and importantly to also share ideas, skills, strategies as we move forward in whatever way you feel safe and comfortable to do so, essentially, and no pressure to engage either. But as we move forward, anyone makes a suggestion, I read anything out that was an anonymous suggestion that means something to you, that sounds useful, I would just really strongly encourage you to just make a note of it in your own words, the way that you've understood it. So we're starting this session today by thinking about stress, and how stress can progress towards burnout. So when we're thinking about stress, stress essentially is a response to something that we perceive to be stressful. So stress is something that is normal, that is expected in the life and the society that we live in, and it impacts us all in very different ways. So there might be, excuse me, things like emotional responses. We might feel stressed, overwhelmed, we might feel panicked, we might feel irritable, for example, we might feel anxious, we might feel like a deer in headlights almost. Physiologically, we will all again notice different responses in ourselves, whether it's things like our heart rate increasing, feeling hot, feeling sweaty, feeling like full of energy. Psychologically, you might feel things like your thoughts racing. Our thoughts can also kind of go black and white. And again, it does really relate to our perception. So not only of the situation, in which case, in the same environment, we will all perceive it, the same task, the same situation, the same conversations, environment, all these things differently. Some of us will perceive something to be stressful and a pressure, something that we're worried about how we're going to navigate, handle, for example. Other people will even perceive the stress response differently and maybe see it as something that's going to energize me and help me to think more quickly and take action, for example. So our perception does have a lot to say. It can be positive and it can also be distressing. So again, this is something that we have been designed to experience. Stress in smaller, manageable doses does prepare our bodies for action. It does energize us. It releases endorphins. It increases blood flow to our muscle. It's designed to help us to take action, to do something, to improve our outcomes, improve our circumstances. Stress releases lots of glucose to our brain, so our focus can sharpen, and it can feel, again, when it's manageable in shorter periods, it can help us to feel like we make quicker decisions. It motivates us to then act on those decisions, and also it can be seen as information. Like, it can bring our attention to areas of our lives that might need to be addressed. Like, actually, maybe every time I'm around these particular people or this person, I feel really stressed, and there's something about this dynamic that doesn't feel comfortable for me or doesn't feel safe for me in some sort of way. Or maybe it highlights the fact that I'm working way too much at the moment and that work-life balance has really kind of been lost, and maybe a boundary or, something needs to kind of be implemented there. So we can see it as a signal. We can see it as something that can, again, dependent on how we're experiencing it and how much we're experiencing it, it can be something that does help us to think more quickly, prioritize, act, for example. And it can be the result of not only the external pressures, deadlines, trying to get the kids to school on time in the morning, remembering to go pick this thing up, dealing with this, sorting the dog, get the dog to the vet, dealing with an elderly relative, all these external pressures and the internal pressures that we also put on ourselves, which we're going to think about a little bit more later. As I said, it can be short term, it might last for 5 minutes, it can be really long term. And again, we're all going to have a different perspective on whether something is really short term or long term for us and what we feel able to tolerate. We've all got very different capacities to tolerate stress at this moment, and that is absolutely okay and understandable and reflective of our lives, fundamentally. And it can feel really, really overwhelming. And over time, stress can accumulate, particularly if we're not getting the support, the resources that we need, we're not getting the time to use strategies that work for us, and it can increase the risk of us feeling more stressed, increase the risk of us progressing to burnout, essentially. So rather than me waffling on about things that help reduce stress, we've done plenty of sessions like this on stress before. We've got stress reduction skills practice sessions that we'll be delivering coming up over the next few months, which you're more than welcome to attend. Just from your experience, from, as the experts in your lives on what does and doesn't work for you, what kind of strategies help you to manage your stresses, help you to reduce stress. And it can be as broad or as narrow as you like. It can be anything and everything from therapy to getting an early night to talking to other people, organising yourselves, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We just really want an opportunity to kind of share ideas and suggestions so that other people can also benefit from these things. So it looks like the word clouds are working for most of you, because we've had almost 30 responses already, which is fantastic. So thank you so much. If it's not working for you, do try going through the chat function or just replying through the chat. But mindfulness is coming up quite a bit here, which is fantastic. Sleep and getting more of it. Exercise, specifically, we've had yoga come up there. Walking, wild swimming. Oh, love that. Do you know, that just reminds me, I had a phase of that a couple of years ago, and it was incredible, and I completely forgot about it after I moved house. So thank you. whoever suggested while swimming. Doing a to-do list, being organised so you don't have to worry about missing things, breath work, nature walks, writing lists, journaling, time away from work, massage, crafting, breathing exercises, being outside, having a bit of quiet space, watching comedy, yes, a personal favourite of mine, watching comedy, going to the gym, socialising, spending time with people, fantastic. So lots and lots and lots of strategies there, reading, therapy, doing something distracting, walking the dog, affirmations on YouTube, writing poetry, love that, wine, I appreciate the honesty. Now, some of those things, absolutely brilliant, and they might require us to have the time and the space to go away and engage with those things. Maybe we need an hour in our diary outside of work, for example, to be able to go and engage with wild swimming or to go to the gym. And sometimes it can be useful to think about using strategies as regularly as possible to manage stress as and when it's arising. So if, for example, you're in the middle of a busy day and you've only got 30 seconds, a minute, you've got 5 minutes while you're in the car, before your next meeting, whatever it looks like, is there anything that you find useful that works in a shorter period of time so that we still have tools that we can engage with, even if we don't have the time or the energy even to go away and engage with some of the amazing things that people have spoken about, like socializing, like, exercise, for example. So even just a walk around the block, walking away from the laptop, moving away from the desk is brilliant. Lots of breath work and breathing exercises here. Listening to calming music. This might be my favourite response in a very long time. Someone says, jig about like a loon. Okay, so just moving about, moving our body, doesn't care what we look like, just moving about, dancing, shaking, jumping, whatever that looks like, just physically getting it out. A quick lap around the house, the office, deep breathing, finding a peaceful spot, listen to my favourite song if I'm sat in the car. There's some fantastic responses here. Thank you everyone so much. Visualising a calm place and visualising ourselves feeling calm, which is fantastic. Sitting in the garden, writing a list, lots of stuff here around like just actually getting space from the stressor, like your desk, like your work, having a conversation, listening to some music, lots of self-soothing things here, having some chocolate, making a drink. I love, 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 love. Thank you all so, so much. And again, anything that felt useful, make a note of it. So again, it can be useful to think about having tools that we can use to try and manage stresses as they arise so that we can try and nip things in the bud and reduce the stress as soon as possible. And that can look like, as people have said, just taking a moment, seconds, a minute to breathe, to engage with the environment exactly as it is, to do mindfulness, to meet your needs, to have a drink, to have a normal conversation, to stroke the pet, to go be in the garden and just listen to the birds, whatever it looks like for you, just taking a moment, connecting to yourself, connecting to other people, having a normal conversation, connecting to yourself and thinking about what it is that I need. What are these feelings, emotions trying to tell me? Like, and really kind of being open to hearing the messages that your body and your brain are kind of sending to you, and actually engaging with these things, even when we feel like we don't have the time or the energy. That's often the time that you're going to benefit from it the most. And also, again, just being mindful of things like critical self-talk. Try to just even notice that it's there, doing our best to challenge it, whether it is through things like therapy, journaling, as people mentioned, talking to someone else. Even AI is proven to be quite popular for helping people to kind of unpin and work out, what kind of thoughts are unhelpful, harmful, helping to challenge them. So we can be quite creative with this, and many of those things are free. Now, when we think about burnout, we're thinking about something slightly different. In fact, quite markedly different. In some ways, it almost presents as the opposite. So when we're thinking about burnout, first of all, what comes to mind for you? What kind of experiences, feelings, thoughts, anything at all that comes to mind for you before I start talking about what burnout is and what it looks like? And I mean, exhaustion is by far and away at the moment the most common response here. So yes, we've got mental, physical exhaustion, just total lethargy, feeling tired. I've just seen pop up in the chat, feeling ill, fatigue, overwhelm, feeling uninterested and shut down. Feeling empty, like there's nothing left in the tank, absolutely. Feeling like I can't carry on, depression. We've also had responses around, oh, like heavy body, heavy mind, tired, can't work, can't get out of bed, can't do it anymore, shutting down emotionally, zombification, feeling like autism's out of control. Absolutely. So for those of us who are neurodivergent, our differences are absolutely amplified, and it does make any sort of executive functioning, performing tasks that everybody else takes for granted so much harder. And again, autistic burnout is very, very real. And might require some slight different things. Achy, feeling numb, for example. Okay, so some really insightful responses there. Thank you so much. Oh, and I've just noticed things like can't focus, fatigue, can't get words out, tired all day, and difficulty sleeping. So absolutely. Unfortunately, burnout is a state of extreme exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion. It is overwhelming and it is persistent. And as much as we think about burnout in relation to work, and absolutely work can very much heavily contribute to us experiencing burnout, to say that it just impacts our work is, naive. Essentially, it impacts every area of our lives. It does leave us depleted, unproductive, deeply unhappy, cynical even. So burnout essentially is something that can occur if we're spending way too much time in a state of overwhelming stress, anxiety, just frantic, chaotic, unpredictable environments, essentially. And it's almost like a protective mechanism. Our brain, after spending too much time trying to fight, flight, deal with the situation, it kind of plunges us down as a protective mechanism to preserve our energy, to just kind of focus on survival, essentially. And the term burnout came about because the psychologists that kind of discovered it, I suppose, and identified it as its own unique, distinct state, they felt that the people that they were working with, they were kind of likening them to like burned out buildings, because it was like all inner resources that they had been completely emptied, as if they've been consumed by a fire, and it left this real great emptiness inside. It's really quite profound and really significantly impacting. And it's very much characterized by three symptoms, essentially. So exhaustion, so total extreme exhaustion that isn't going to get better because you've had a week off or because you've had a long weekend. And it's mental exhaustion. We can't think, we can't get our words out. Emotional exhaustion, and we become disconnected from our own emotions, and we don't, we might feel like we're not feeling anything anymore, a bit more like depression, as people stated. Compassion fatigue, we might lose our compassion for the people. There's no energy or resources left to give. No matter how much you try to rest, we never feel quite refreshed. The cynicism, so not only do things not feel like they're worth doing, we don't get the same satisfaction from things that previously we would have seen as an achievement. It doesn't feel like it was worth the effort, the energy. We're more likely to predict the worst case scenarios. We are more likely to feel detached from ourselves, from our relationships, from our responsibilities, for example. And then the inefficiency, essentially, we don't have any energy. We can't focus and think in the same way. It makes it very difficult to get started, to get finished, to do anything outside of work. And so that also impacts our ability to perform, which then adds to our stress and so on and so forth. And like I said, it does impact every area of our life, and we're only going to be able to touch on some of the differences that we might see. But whereas with stress, again, we might see lots of energy and thinking really fast and clearly, and maybe in black and white terms, and effective at prioritizing. With burnout, it's almost like the opposite. Rather than lots of energy, we've got no energy left. We're more likely to become run down, become physically unwell, have musculoskeletal pain, migraines, chronic headaches. Can be very physical in its nature, essentially. Our appetite might change. Emotionally, psychologically, again, we are more likely to feel detached from ourselves, from our work. We're more likely to also experience lots of guilt and blame with regards to ourselves and how we feel like we're not matching up to what we think we should be able to do and manage, as well as we think other people are doing. It makes it very difficult to concentrate, for example. And the result can be that our behavior changes, our relationships can change inside of work, outside of work. We might be too tired and exhausted to deal with other people. We might also end up being off unwell because it's too much. We can't manage work anymore, which impacts our finances, which might impact our ability to go and engage with hobbies, interests, socializing, therapy, other things that might otherwise help us and top up our energy levels. So there are many, many, many factors that can contribute to us kind of progressing towards this state. And again, only share anything that you feel comfortable and able to do so here, because again, this is a very personal topic and, you know, again, something that really does impact our lives. But what factors do you think might contribute to us experiencing burnout? And we've got some fantastic responses already. Parenthood, yes. So it's not just about things that are going on in work and the stresses and pressures in work, but also being a parent and how maybe that impacts your sleep and how much stress you're experiencing day to day. If you are a parent who's not receiving adequate support, you're a single parent, for example, or you're a parent who's, you know, there are so many facets to our lives that also add to our stresses and pressures. Being unwell, going through perimenopause, menopause, being neurodivergent, going through bereavement, relationship changes, relationship breakdowns, isolation. You know, we think work does and absolutely can significantly impact our risk of experiencing burnout. And let's not forget the context of our wider lives. So yeah, lots of things about just being overworked, at work or at home, not recognising and treating stress early enough and things escalating, limited support, care and responsibilities, not understanding the work, not having any time for yourself, taking too much on, absolutely poor leadership. Really important point. Toxic workplace, again, very important point. If you feel like unsafe, on edge, on eggshells every time you're going into work, you never know from one moment to the next how things are going to be. Absolutely, that is a chronic stressor, even without then thinking about any other factors. Being carers for other relatives, dealing with child's illness as a parent, absolutely. Trauma, money issues, yes, lots and lots and lots of, and always being contactable. Yeah, that's also a really important point. Digital boundaries might be something that we think about. So yes, there are many work-related risk factors, such as lack of control over your work, not having the resources that you need to do your work and do it safely and do it to a standard that you're proud of, having to work in any sort of way that goes against your values, lack of social support, dysfunctional dynamics, like we said, toxic workplaces, bullying, harassment, discrimination, exclusion, work-life imbalance, and not just in terms of like the hours that you're working, but if your work is significantly draining any energy so that you've got nothing left to give for your life outside of work. Unclear expectations, working in a caring role, not receiving the adaptations and accommodations you need if you're neurodivergent, if you have challenges with your mental health, if you're also a carer, you have a physical disability and you're faced with attitudinal barriers at work as well as physical barriers, as well as, again, all the life chronic stresses that we've already touched about. And it's not just about the workplace. So the psychologists, again, that identified and kind of discovered and coined the term burnout, they identified 12 stages of burnout. It doesn't just happen overnight, essentially. And it does a good job, I think, of identifying how we also contribute potentially to our progression towards burnout. So typically burnout starts with being driven and ambitious because we care, we want to do a good job, which means that we maybe work harder, we want to prove ourselves, we maybe take on additional responsibilities, we say yes to things, we don't want to let people down. And because we're taking on more and more, it becomes harder then to engage with things like rest, your lunch breaks, leisure activities, for example. We start prioritising things like work, caregiving duties as other examples. Over time, we might start to blame external factors for the fact that we are working harder to the extent that our fundamental needs are being neglected. So maybe it's the situation, it's this person's not supporting me, that manager's not clear, there's too much workload, for example, and this never comes up in the right order, but it's fine. And as there's kind of that that psychological distress that kind of comes from like not being able to fix things, our values kind of shift in that we start to value work more strongly, essentially, over other areas of our life, like other relationships, other hobbies, because it feels like if I just kind of put more eggs in this basket, I can fix that and then things will be better. And we can end up in a state of denial about the impact of our own behaviours. And we start to dismiss the signs of burnout starting to emerge, like fatigue, like irritability. And we keep pushing and pushing and pushing ourselves. We might withdraw from things like colleagues as maybe resentment builds. We might withdraw from things like family, friends, people outside of work. Our behaviour might change. We might be more snappy, more shut down, for example, more critical in a way that isn't typically what we're like and who we want to be. We might feel more detached from our sense of self and who we feel that we are at our core. We might not feel as connected to other people in the same way. We might start to really experience a sense of emptiness and struggle to find kind of fulfillment in work, outside of work. We might start to rely on things like food, caffeine, alcohol, other substances to try to manage those feelings. All of which, because we're also in the midst of all of this, often kind of blaming ourselves, criticizing ourselves, putting ourselves down, all of which can also contribute to feelings of hopelessness, despair, depression, and fundamentally in the end, total burnout. So again, it's not something that happens overnight, and it can be useful to recognize not only where we're at the moment, but are there any early warning signs in ourselves that we can notice, for example. But again, like I said, I think it does do a good job, that model of kind of identifying that we also unintentionally contribute to our burnout, whether it's because we are in denial and we, blame ourselves for not managing as well as we think we should do, because we, just set higher and higher standards for ourselves. And our perfectionism or our people-pleasing tendencies mean that we never say no, and we neglect our own needs consistently because of that. Our challenges around boundaries might mean that, again, we don't make boundaries and set boundaries and maintain them for our own sake and for our own well-being. Maybe because we're putting so much time and energy and resources to trying to repair the stresses in our work, we've withdrawn from the things that focus on coping and adding to our quality of life. And it's absolutely not our fault that we do any of this. It's not our fault at all. And things like therapy, journaling, just engaging with things that used to work can be really, really, really useful for improving our overall quality of life. So on that note, from this point on, we are just thinking for the last portion of the session about what works for you to help prevent burnout, to undo burnout, given, again, the factors that contribute. Again, there are the external pressures, our health, our neurodivergence, our perspectives on the situation, our self-criticism, for example. Is there anything that, based on your experiences so far, you have found useful, whether it's even just understanding that it's not my fault that I'm feeling like this, and actually having a bit more compassion for yourself and understanding for yourself, whether it's things like boundaries, as I've just noticed somebody say, learning to say not taking work home. Yeah, and if you do work from home, it can be things like trying to improve work-life separation, whether that's, not working in the same space that you then relax in the evenings, or that you have your food in the evenings, whether that's, making sure that you don't have your work phone on and your laptop on so that you're hearing notifications pinging, not giving out your personal number even to colleagues, so that outside of work, you're not talking about work with people that remind you about work, for example. By realizing it's not just me and others feel the same is such an important point. Thank you for sharing that. And just normalizing that can be really powerful in and of itself. Finding time alone to regulate, and there's stuff here about like booking self dates, time with my babies, spa days with no phone, realizing that I need help and actually asking for it. It takes an awful lot of courage and bravery to acknowledge that actually maybe I am expecting myself to be able to do too much on my own. And actually, I don't need to or deserve to have to feel so overwhelmed and so alone with this. And actually, being open and honest with yourself about that first and foremost, and then with other people, and trying to get the support that you need. Trying to change your mindset so that you don't take on everything. Recognizing the internal pressures we're putting on ourselves, trying to change work habits, taking time away from work. Yes, absolutely. If you notice that actually every 3-4 months, you start finding that you are more irritable, you are more exhausted all the time, you are more frustrated, you're getting ill more often, maybe that's a time, a useful piece of information that actually probably every 3 months I need to be taking a break from work. And maybe I need to take my break in work during the day, talking to people about how I feel, family time in the evening. So yes, maybe even just thinking about how much time am I spending with people outside of work, just still thinking about work and talking about work, in which case mentally, I might as well still be at the desk. Meditation, girl weekends away, walking with the dog, chat groups with friends so you can get your frustrations out, using my flexi time. Brilliant. Some really, really useful suggestions there. Thank you, everybody, so much. So we can look, I mean, again, there will be many, many things outside of our control, and there will still be things that we can influence. Can't guarantee that everything will now feel life-changingly better, but over time, the things that we do more often than not do shape the way that life feels. So we can even think, really stripping it back just to our habits, like how am I starting my day? Does every day feel like a rush? I wake up at the last possible second, usually because we just want to get more sleep and a bit of a lie-in, or because we're dreading everything that we've got to do today. But because I wake up at the last possible second, and because I've not done this thing or that thing, or the kids aren't up yet, like every day feels like it starts frantic. And then from that point on, I'm in a stress state to begin with. My brain's going to notice any and all potential other stresses. Already I'm overwhelmed and I'm already kind of on the back foot. Thinking about things like, how are you spending your evenings or your downtime off work? How are you disconnecting from work? Are you disconnecting from work? Are you spending hours talking about work, thinking about work? Are you sat working from your bed? And then when you're in bed, your brain is even subconsciously kind of starting to think about work again. Even again, what kind of things are you doing in your evenings, in your weekends, at your nighttime? Burnout can make us deeply, deeply protective of what energy we have left, which means that, again, the more that we focus on the work and any other areas of our life that are causing this chronic stress, the more we focus on that, the less time there is that we're engaging with things that also work for us. And even just again, are my habits working for me? The things that I'm doing more often than not, are they draining me actually when I think about it? Watching, I don't know, true crime documentaries, I'm going to bed and I'm not getting such a restful sleep, or it's on a cliffhanger and then still my mind's racing going to bed. I'm not actually very relaxed and it's taking me longer to get to sleep. And actually I don't feel more rested the next day or the day after that or the day after that. I've been doing this for weeks, for example. Is there anything, big or small, it doesn't matter how small, it can just be being mindful while you're having a bit of a play with the kids in the evening? Does that top your battery up? Are there any things that are neutral? Kind of tracking your week, almost in hindsight, how did I feel after doing that? What if I was doing that day after day after day, often out of habit? The things that we find easiest to do in the moment aren't always necessarily the things that give us the easier life longer term, like having an extra glass of wine in the evening, which again might impact our sleep, our energy levels, our focus, our concentration, our mood for days afterwards. And again, this is not to come from a place of blaming, shaming. Everything we do, our brains push us to do for a reason, to help us to feel differently, essentially. And it can be useful to just recognize, is there anything here that isn't serving its intended purpose? And that is okay. And then can I maybe start with a really tiny, small tweak, like I'll try and go to bed 15 minutes earlier and see if I fall asleep 15 minutes earlier. Maybe I'll try and practice mindfulness for a minute in the morning before I get out of bed because I wake up stressed. Maybe I try to read a page a day of something, whatever it is. Make it as small as possible, as manageable as possible. Don't be trying to kind of reinvent the wheel. But these kind of looking at habits and routines that can help us to kind of identify where our limits are being surpassed. Maybe actually it's okay, actually I can just about manage the challenges that are coming up with parenting and having a child who's unwell, and also dealing with my energy levels and my bad back and all that sort of stuff. But the thing that's pushing me over the edge at the moment, that's surpassing my limit, is then also feeling like I need to be available as maybe a line manager to respond to people's messages outside of hours and at the evenings and the weekends. And that's something that is just draining the life out of me. Or maybe it's at this point trying to be there for other people too much, and you're offering too much emotional support to other people in your life, and we don't have the capacity left to think about ourselves, for example. And boundaries can be really, really challenging. We've done, we have done, or we've got, I've seen it, I've looked at it recently. We've got a webinar around workplace boundaries specifically. We've got strategies, resources around boundaries. They can be really, really difficult to set, and longer term, it can mean that we are less likely to end up in a state of resentment, overwhelm. We can protect our resources, our energy levels, for example. People know what they can and can't expect of us, all of these sorts of things. So we can think about, not only our workload and when we work, but then also, again, things like our digital boundaries, again, including, do I mute the work WhatsApp group so that I'm not sat thinking about work? Or, it can be really, really useful to share our honest feelings and to have those feelings validated and feel like it's not just us. And sometimes it can feel like actually thinking about work in a way that constantly feels kind of negative, and we're only ever talking about the negatives, can also be quite draining. And that's also okay. Both of those things can be true at the same time. It can be really useful to have that outlet, and hearing about this all of the time might also be impacting me. So again, it doesn't necessarily even mean removing ourselves from situations, but giving ourselves break from situations, even like in the workday, giving yourself things like focus time, so that you can actually feel like you can get things done. You're not just available if you're not in a meeting as far as other people are concerned. Again, they can look very, very differently for all of us, and essentially recognizing our limits, using the information. Do I feel like I've agreed to this and now I feel immediate regret, guilt, overwhelm, shame, irritated, resentful, for example? That's really useful information that maybe my limit was before that, kind of essentially. And so maybe I kind of implement that from now on. And again, not saying that this is easy, but it can significantly improve our sense of work-life separation. And this is really, really important when it comes to burnout, particularly if work is a real source of the chronic stress that's contributing to that burnout. Not saying it's the only chronic stress, but it can be very, very significant. So just sharing some ideas, what things help you to actually mentally, emotionally, not just physically leaving the office, but mentally, emotionally switch off from work, so that maybe you notice that you've gone hours without actually thinking about it, which might be a nice change. And again, thank you so much for sharing all of these responses. And somebody's just reiterated exactly what I just mentioned there, things like putting WhatsApp groups on things like silent or mute, so I don't have to see it at the weekend. I'm not getting notified of it. That can be brilliant over the weekend, on your annual leave, the drive home back in the day. And again, it could be things like, many people find like a false commute useful instead. So whether it's you listen to the radio on your headphones and you do a little walk around the block, things like having a shower after work and just putting on different clothes that aren't your work clothes can be enough sometimes to improve that work-life separation. Hiking, engaging with hobbies, music, yoga, watching a film, listening to podcasts. And again, the type of podcast that you listen to can have a massive impact. So I typically after work, I will only listen to like comedy type podcasts, because again, that's something that really creates an opposite emotion to any of the stress maybe that I've been feeling in the workday. Oh, I love this, closing the home office door. So if you have a home office, literally closing the door so you're not seeing it when you're walking past, going for a walk, going to the cinema. Yeah, and again, cinema can be an underrated tool, because when you're there, like somebody mentioned earlier with the spa, we can't use our phones. We're kind of disconnected for a bit. Walking in nature. So again, it could be going for a walk, going for a run, doing something without your phone being there, your phone maybe being on mute, you leave it somewhere else, not having things like work emails on your personal phone. Reading something of my choice for half an hour, connecting with people, listen to audiobooks, go to the seaside. Oh, I love that. I've not been to the seaside in so long. Yeah, no phone when walking. Oh, volunteering at things like Junior Park Run. I love that. Gaming, housework also, whatever it looks like for you, essentially. And just anything that does work, anything that does actually help you to feel rested, replenished, re-energized. We want to do that as often as possible, not just wait until we're so exhausted that now you can't do anything else. And now, okay, right now I'll try and engage with these things. We want to be trying to top the battery up as often as possible. So we might think about, and it can be useful to reflect actually on how often are you engaging with things that actually provide rest. So rest, generally speaking, rest versus relaxation. So things that are relaxing that we often fall into habits of doing don't often always provide the actual rest, mental rest, emotional rest, physical rest that we need. So resting typically is like where we're being rather than doing. So things like mindfulness, whether it's listening to calming music, it could be doing things like gardening, it could be doing yoga, for example, where we're just really being rather than kind of actively doing. And actually things like movement, people have spoken before on these sessions about things like swimming, movement, slow, typically kind of repetitive movements can be relaxing and can also help to create energy as well. So we can think about, do I see this thing as something that's going to take energy from me? Might it create energy actually? Relaxing, things like watching TV, doing puzzles, crafts. I'm seeing everyone making Easter bonnets at the minute. That might be relaxing. And at the end of it, if you've been sat with a glue gun, bedazzling all sorts of flowers and diamantes and sequins, whatever on, you might not feel as refreshed afterwards as what we would have liked or thought that or intended to. And importantly, we do also with burnout need to think about making time to engage with things, even if it doesn't feel like I'm going to have the time for it or the energy for it or the motivation when the time comes, but to engage with things that also just energize us, that we genuinely enjoy and love doing, whether it's listening to really upbeat music, singing, comedy, doing exercise, going to, I don't know, the theatre, the local theatre, going to park runs, doing team activities, games, quizzes. Sometimes it's when we don't have the energy that we're going to benefit from it the most, because this thing might actually top energy up. We might feel like, okay, it's going to take some energy to get there and to be there. And this time in 3 hours, will I feel, or is there a chance even that I might feel slightly differently for having gone and done this thing that typically does energize me? Because unfortunately, yes, there will be times where work does have to take up bigger portions of our lives, or other stresses in our lives take up longer, take up more of our resources, for example. But fundamentally, the more that we then kind of put our time, energy, resources to dealing with the stresses, making work better. If I just keep working this hard and then I get through that thing, then everything will be better, for example. Longer term, essentially what then happens is these stresses, these work stresses, other stresses, take up such a big portion of our life that anything small thing feels so much more magnified. The less we even remember and connect to the things that used to bring us joy, excitement, that make life feel as worthwhile, essentially, it can really just shift the way that life feels quite fundamentally. So we're not denying or ignoring or pretending that all of those stresses and factors don't exist anymore. But what we want to do our best to try to do is kind of build life and meaning outside of that. Again, if our values have kind of realigned as we progress to burnout, where we focus our time and energy much more so on things like work to try and work things out and make things better, we're also then kind of neglecting everything else that also makes us who we are. And fundamentally, that, again, that term that the psychologists use about burnout, coming from likening people to burned out buildings, their inner resources that disappeared as if they've been consumed by fire. What they also said was that in every fire, there are glowing embers, and we can use them to rekindle the spark. So it is important to make time and energy and resources available to engage with things that might, I can't guarantee it's going to work every time, but that might increase some sort of sense of energy again and excitement again and just positive emotions again, even if in that moment we're not experiencing that. Sometimes it's doing the opposite action to the emotion we're currently feeling that helps us to shift the way that we're feeling quite fundamentally. So do we have anything to look forward to? What do you have to look forward to? So we've got things like Easter weekend. Yeah, long weekend, hopefully full of chocolate, maybe sunshine, trip to the theatre, a holiday, moving house. We've got things like birthdays coming up, some annual leave, going wild swimming in Wales. Oh, performing in a show. Oh my gosh, I love that. So exciting. Moving into our dream home. Incredible. Congratulations. Live action role play event. I mean, I'm going to be Googling that after this. Going to the seaside, spa day booked, seeing friends, just having the weekend and having something to look forward to. Things like going to the zoo, going to Prague, garden centre to spend a voucher so it doesn't even feel like real money. Amazing. If it's not coming out of our account, bonus. Fantastic. So yeah, so just making sure, even when it feels like there isn't enough time to do these things, so there's not enough energy to do these things, doing these things because they might create energy, because they might be a more worthwhile use of our time. And we're not going to have the time and energy to do these all of the time. That's absolutely okay. And we can recognize when we're also putting pressure on ourselves to be fine, to get on with it, to just be grateful all the time, to just be happy all the time, to ignore our body screaming out for rest. We can do our best to recognize that we actually are doing our absolute best. And this self-sacrifice and self-criticism, shame, only increases the likelihood of us struggling longer and only increases the likelihood of us achieving and reaching burnout. There is no award for never asked for help, made everyone else happy all the time, never took time off. You know, you also matter. You also have limits. You also deserve to be taken care of. Even if it's us doing the taking care of ourselves, that also still counts. So given that real enduring change just happens one tiny thing at a time, just one little note of reflection before we go away and get back to doing everything that we need to do, fulfilling responsibilities, obligations, duties, all of these sorts of things. Just, is there one little thing that you can do for yourself today, this evening, this weekend, this week coming up, this month, that will just help to try to realign that balance, to try to reduce the likelihood of us experiencing burnout, prevent burnout, try to undo any sort of progression that's already taken place through no fault of your own. All we can do is our best, fundamentally. And again, if you can do this now, brilliant. If not, before you go, can you just block out some time in your diary, in your calendar? If it's accounted for, we're more likely to do it. We're not having to wait for motivation to strike. Anything that you can do, because you also matter and your well-being matters, and none of us deserve to end up in that terrible state of burnout where we do feel empty, we don't feel like we've got anything left. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here and for engaging so much, for sharing so much as the experts in your lives, in your experiences, in the things that work for you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, thank you for being here. Do take care of yourselves. If you've got any questions or anything, please feel free to email us if there's anything that we can do. We've got lots of these sessions. Again, we've got some stress reduction skills-based sessions coming up. Sign up to any and every that might be useful. But thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves. Hope to see you again on another session. Thank you everyone so much. Thank you, everyone. And again, this was only tip of the iceberg, tip of the iceberg. We could talk about this all day. Therapy can be brilliant for working out what you need specifically. But yeah, just thank you so much. Take care of yourselves and have a peaceful